Why don't we bring the panel on? Panel, how's everyone going?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm good.
It's going.
Ben, Dave,
Hey,
you good?
Howdy.
Hey. All right. Hey. All right. Sorry. Just doing some last minute changing of the tires as we dive down the freeway. Adjustments. Okay. Good job on your talks. We've got some questions here. I'm just going to ask them in order. Most likes gets asked first because it's community curated list. Yeah. All right. I think we know the answer already, but I have to ask it. GraphQL versus NGRX. Why isn't there any Angular GraphQL this year? Please share good resources and patterns for Angular plus GraphQL. Actually, I don't know. Anyone? the top voted question.
I'll take a stab at it.
Go.
So, in my opinion, it's not GraphQL or NGRX. The two can play really well together. Sam, Julian, and I were just talking about maybe doing some live streams this summer or some blog content exploring this topic, but I think they can play really well together. And in fact, I use GraphQL with NGRX for a job. So be looking out for that. We'd love to put some content out there that answers that question.
Yeah. Okay, cool. This one's for David. How you doing, man?
Doing great.
Good. All right. Why use a traditional server approach instead of a serverless approach with Firebase, such as Firebase?
Well, it depends on what specifically you mean by that. There's a traditional server approach being like one server. So whether what you're doing on the server, if you're serving your app, like serving assets through it, a traditional server approach. And that way, where you're doing like a server rendering, like every time someone sends a request, I'm going to generate some HTML and send it back. That's one way of having a general server approach. And I think that is the drawbacks of that server approach is that you really want to be taking advantage of a CDN, especially if you're building a single page app, because you're not really, a lot of your rendering is on the client side. So if you are going to one server somewhere and you're just sending back that HTML through, back from that one server, you're going to have a big performance hit there because it's much faster to cache those in a CDN around the world rather than having to make that trip back to that one server. So that's serverless can work really well with that because you can trigger a serverless function to write to a CDN. Which is and so the serverless function doesn't trigger every single time. It'll be cached in the CDN. So that's one really nice approach. But if you mean in terms of like how I was demoing off the security, there's not actually, however you want to do it, isn't that big of a deal. What's nice about the serverless approach is that it's event driven. So serverless will trigger when that specific thing happens that you care about. Whereas if you were doing it on a traditional server, you would just have to set up your own like event processing system that's like, hey, I know this thing happened, now run this. So so those are kind of the two approaches for that.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Dave. Okay, Mike, I think you answered this, but just to clarify, can I use NGRX let and NGRX push without using the store?
So you can use NGRX component, the entire library, without using a single other NGRX library. All that matters is that you're using some kind of observable way of structuring your state. So whether that's Akita or NGXS or Dan Wallin's observable store or behavior subjects in a service, those all are going to play great with NGRX component.
Okay, so I'm going to just clarify the question. They want to know if they can use NGRX let and NGRX push, and you said they can use NGRX component. I'm guessing NGRX let and NGRX push are part of the component.
That's right. Those are two APIs exposed in NGRX component. All right.
So yes, you can use NGRX component without the store, the other pieces of NGRX. Okay. All right. So Mike, imagine I'm building a library that I'm going to ship out to the peeps. Right? I'm going to give some of that love. Does it make sense to put the store inside of my library, inside of a published library? What are your thoughts on libraries exposing their actions and effects to applications?
Yeah, I think you could do this. I'd be really curious to hear what your use case is. We support an API that makes that possible. So you can use effects module.for feature and the store module.for feature to sort of ship your own effects and reducers. And then when it comes to actions, my only recommendation there is to make sure you're exporting actions in a separate import than the rest of the library. So like if your library's name was cookies, it'd be cookies/actions where you export all your actions. That way it plays really well with sort of some of the lazy loading strategies that NGINX developers are accustomed to.
Cool. Thanks. All right, Ben. A lot of us we've heard about RX dev tools, RxJS dev tools. Nicholas got us all excited. We wants the good toys. Is there any plans on that coming out anytime soon, or what do you think?
Well, he's had those out for a while. I don't know how much time he's had to update them, but it's called RxJS Spy Dev Tools. So
Okay.
you can find those actually under Nicholas's GitHub. And we have a plan where we want to try to get all of that like into the core repository, into the main repository, so we can kind of keep those up to date at the same time. But that hasn't materialized yet.
Keep going, Ben.
That's right. So Cartant. I don't actually know how to say that. Cartant. Anyways,
Yeah.
So you can find that, and we want to try to get that into the same repository as RxJS master, and try to keep it in sync. I don't know how compatible it is with version 7. I assume it's still fully compatible. I haven't talked with Nicholas about that in a while.
So if I want to install it, if I want to install RxJS Spy, like the Chrome Dev Tools, or like the Chrome extension, do I just go to his RxJS Spy repo, or where do I go? Any ideas?
Yeah, you want to go to the repository because it has instructions for how to install it.
Okay.
Although I think that it might actually be under RxJS. No, never mind. You have to go to the README. I'm looking at the README now, actually.
Okay.
You have to go to the README to
All right.
follow how to install it.
Okay, we're going to put a link to it down below. And so if you go down to the action button, down over there, it's down there. Okay. Mike. So imagine I want to go away from the zone.js. And I want to go to NGRX view, which is part of NGRX component, right?
Yeah.
I can't just like find, replace, go, right? I can't just like remove zone.js and then wrap my entire app in NGRX view, right? Like, so the question is, the kids want to know, what are some of the recommended steps for that migration?
Yeah. So hopefully that it'll be a drop-in replacement for the async pipe, but that's not going to be enough to get you completely off of using Zone.js. Before we call NGINX component ready to go, we'll have a more robust answer for this. But it's going to require more than just code that you're authoring to change. There are a couple of Angular libraries that you are likely using, like Angular Material and Angular Router, that we're hoping to work with that will need to make some changes on their end too. So we're still a while away from getting there, but component gets us on the right start.
Okay. 2 questions for Dave. First question, what would be the best approach for SSO into multiple subdomains using Firebase auth module?
So that's as long as you have the right like domains whitelisted, that can work just fine, especially if you're using like a provider, like a single provider like Google across all of them, or email and password. It's pretty simple. There's ways with Firebase auth to link accounts, but that's usually pretty straightforward since your auth is decentralized from your like main servers and stuff like that. So that tends to be pretty straightforward. Where it might get tricky is if you have like your own like custom authentication system, then that's still like easy enough to do, but there's going to be some work you're going to have to do to tie some things together. So for the most part it works, but yeah, you definitely need to figure out like what systems are kind of going to cause you problems.
Okay, cool. So with the Firebase SSO, good. With the custom authentication might be a little harder.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say harder, but more work.
Okay. All right. So Dave, your to-do app that you showed in your slides, the kids want access to your to-do app.
So I prefer to call it like it's a Kanban board. It's not totally just it's every app's a to-do app. What am I saying?
It's a better version though. Like don't disrespect it, right? Call it a Kanban.
No, let's call it what it is. Every app really is either a chat app or a to-do app. Like if you think about like a grocery list app, that's just an app where you're just chatting about groceries. And like you just think about it, every app out there. I mean, this is a chat app right here. We're just chatting. So you just think about it that way. But yeah, I will have I'll have that updated, and I'll have to get the ng-conf account to RT it.
Okay. Deal. Ben, this is probably a good chance to talk about some things. Kind of an interesting question, and I think maybe you can talk. You don't have to talk around it, but it would be cool if you talked at it and then around it as well.
I'm just laughing because this is probably a good time to talk about some things. Like I'm being sat down by my dad.
Ben, I need to explain some things to you, how the grass grows, buddy.
Yeah.
No, I want you to explain to me how the grass grows. That's what I'm asking. All right. So for 7.1, you've got ESLint rules, but Angular uses TSLint. So how are we supposed to catch this stuff in our Angular?
The reason, I mean, if people want to help us with the TSLint rules, then that's great. But the reason that we're targeting those is, one, they're not written yet. We need to write them. And TSLint is moving over to be ESLint. That's the last I heard of it. And I don't think that's changed. ESLint runs a lot faster. It has to do with the architecture, and they're able to handle the TypeScript side of things as well now, I guess. So that's what we're targeting. All of those things are open to suggestion. But the most important thing is that we're able to accommodate a large swath of people. RxJS is slow moving because it's all volunteer work done after hours these days. So it's I wouldn't worry about suddenly you need to upgrade to TS or ESLint like next month. Like you'll probably need to upgrade to ESLint, I would guess, before we even have these things released, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, man.
Yep.
Here's a question for Ben that not sure how much. Maybe just this. Anyway, I'm just gonna ask it. Is it possible for the deprecated subscribe methodology to be refactored automatically in a future ng update schematic?
Yeah, so that's the whole idea behind trying to get these code transformations done in upcoming minor releases. Is ideally not only would they be something you could just run from a command line, but if it's something you can run from a command line, then it should be something that could be run from like ng update or whatever, just to actually have the scaffolding in place for people that are using Angular CLI to update those things for you.
Okay.
So that's the whole idea, is we want to make sure that migration for people, the majority of the people that use RxJS is as smooth as possible.
Okay. Do those migration scripts, are you going to include the ESLint transitioning as well in there? Or what are your thoughts?
I mean, ideally it would just leverage the same transformations, right? So,
okay.
Like it would be great if it's great to use a linting tool for these things because they can do fixes and transformations, and they can notify you while you're writing code that you're doing the wrong thing. So if you can knock them out like that, then you get the most bang for your buck. So that's ideally what we want to do. We're going to need a lot of help doing it, though, I think, being the small crew that we are.
Cool, man. Thanks.
Yep.
Another question the kids want to know. Oh, sorry. They're in bad order. Sorry, this one's for Mike. It was going to be for Ben, but Mike's got higher votes. Okay. Mike, do you have a recommendation as far as structuring your state vertically, i.e. nesting? Hold on. Everything just reshifted. Hold on. Or horizontally, different keys of the same state object?
Yeah, I think in NGRX land we recommend a horizontal structure. We like to think of NGRX state kind of like a database where you structure everything with multiple tables within that same database. That just makes it easier to select and compose data together using tools like selectors. So that'd be my recommendation: horizontal versus vertical.
Okay. Mike, any sort of plans to bring some sort of local component state to Angular natively?
Yes, that is something we will have to tackle as part of NGRX component. There are already a couple of proposals out within the team that we're discussing right now. When we do that, it will be a state management solution for component state that will live completely independently of our state management libraries. So stay tuned for that. We'll have more things to say about it soon.
I think the question, and maybe you're answering this, is they want to know if I don't want to use NGRX, is Angular going to provide something by default as well? I think that's what they're asking.
Oh, gotcha. Is Angular going to provide something natively for local component state? Yeah. I don't know. There have been comments about this before. If you've not seen Mishko's talk from last ng-conf,
they
goes into some of this. I'd go watch that video.
But so, okay, do you have any more knowledge about that happening, or are you kind of like, I don't know?
Yeah, I really don't know.
Okay.
I know it's something we're going to tackle on NGRX side as well, but I'm not sure about the Angular native implementation.
Okay, cool. Where can we get more examples of NGRX data state management?
Reach out to Ward Bell on Twitter. He's sort of the mastermind behind NGRX data, and he has the most experience by far. He's using it in a very, very large application that can point you to really good code samples and examples.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask this last one, then we're done. This one's for Ben. It's kind of a hard one. So one of the barriers to entry for people who are learning Angular is RxJS. Right? There's several, but one of them is RxJS.
Sure.
How do you think? What do you think about how to make that barrier lower?
I think there probably needs to be more guidance to, just use like a promise. If you find it that confusing, just use it like a promise. You can subscribe to it and get the value out of it and do whatever you want with it. And particularly if you're only dealing with HTTP, if you don't unsubscribe, is that great? No, it's not great. You're going to be eating resources that you didn't want to eat, but you're in the same place you would have been if you were using promises. And the difference is you realize it now, but at the end of the day, if it's truly that hard for you, don't worry about operators. Just get your observable, subscribe to it, and do a bunch of imperative code. And eventually, hopefully, somebody comes along and helps you learn RxJS, or you learn more, and you realize, like, oh, I could have done these things more tersely with these operators, or I could have done them with better memory guarantees with these operators and the inherent unsubscription and all these other things. But if it's super hard for you, just get the observable and subscribe to it. It's okay. I'm not going to come to your house and berate you for just subscribing and never unsubscribing or not using operators. If anyone ever does berate you for that, you can send them to me and I'll berate them.
Yes.
It's
one of the cool things that at RxJS Live was Jay Phelps. He said, "Hey, we got to stop shaming people in the community for not being as advanced with RxJS as maybe we are." And I think that's important. Just learn it the same way the rest of us learned it, piece by piece, make all the same mistakes. It's fine, right? Right.
It's not there's no RxJS way to do things. I don't want, there's the functional reactive programming, academia crowd. And then there's the rest of us that are just getting our jobs done. And I cater to the rest of us. It's very, very important to me that everyone treats each other with respect in the community. And it's also important to me that beginners feel okay with doing what they need to do to get their job done. It's fine. If you've got a Swiss Army knife and all you need to do is use it to bang in a nail, that's banging the damn nail. It's okay. You don't need to find exactly the right tool out of 70 tools on your Swiss Army knife to bang in the nail. You just need to bang the nail in.
Cool.
That's fine.
Thanks, man. Dave, by the way, I just barely noticed your shirt. Great job.
Oh, this I've had this on the whole time.
No,
I don't know
yeah.
what you're talking about.
I know. I just barely noticed. My bad. All right. Okay, gentlemen, appreciate your time. I know this was hard to focus on preparing talks and whatnot in like light of what's going on. So we really, really appreciate your dedication to the community and coming today and presenting these messages. So thank you.